what is the definition of leadership? What is leadership? And I think we all have a different sense of what it is. I think there's so many different ideas about what leadership actually is. And so what I'd like to do is establish a definition and then talk about a topic that has very much to do with coming right into and living the leadership that I'm about to say. And here's what leadership is. Leadership is the continuous access to the highest quality of expression that you can occupy at any moment. Listen to that sentence, that description. Leadership is the continuous, consistency, continuous, the continuous access, so something is cleared, there's a clearance, to the highest quality expression you can occupy at any moment. And this suggests that there is some expression, there is movement that is moving in you, and that movement moves you to create something. It moves you to act, to take leadership, to claim leadership, to take responsibility for that expression that is being accessed. So what is the access to? Well, the access is unto something that is open so that we can access. What is accessed? Well, we can access what we see. We can learn what is moving in us, what's moving through us, what is necessary to carry out a call to action by seeing, which is vision. Vision is to see. In Italian is visio, which is to see something, to see into things more deeply, to see into the world, the community, to see into what's going on in our experience more deeply. So if that is a quality of access, if that is a access point, then there must be something that's not that. So we have something to compare to. And so what is it that blocks that access, that particular access point, the seeing? What blocks that is our voice of judgment. And voice of judgment is our database. Because as we go throughout life, we collect things based on our experiences, observations, inferences that store up in our sense-making as concepts. And so we reuse these concepts as a form of being efficient, being able to know quickly how to make sense of situations, how to put names on things, how to define situations. And it's all good. However, when we reuse those concepts, beliefs, assumptions, expectations, habituated judgment, all the voice of judgment, it becomes problematic because it fills in the blanks with assumptions and things that activate and influence our behavior. And so we call this structure. So the structure, the thought as a concept, is giving rise to some feeling, which is creating a behavior, which then probably leads to a consequence. So let's give an example. For example, let's say in an organization, I have a belief that another person is a really cruddy, mean person. They're out to get me. They're out to get people. They're evil. Let's just say I hold a really strong opinion of someone, and then over time, I begin to look for things that are consistent with that belief. So I begin to kind of galvanize that belief, right? It becomes solid. It becomes certain. But over time, as I kind of see, what I don't see or don't catch is that the belief is actually a lens or a bias from which I'm confirming what I see again and again and again. It's a reflex. And when this is in use, then I act out of that place. I probably disconnect from the person. I don't treat them well. I look for ways to be passive-aggressive, which in circulation brings them into being more of a person against me, which then reconfirms my certainty. So we really are, in this sense, we're thinking as an active agency, as an actor within a larger system, where the voice of judgment reinforces the behavior that I see. But when I come to seeing what I see, it's so often easy to blame what I see, to say, no, it's this way, no, it's that way, it must be this, and I'm fixed on that. But it's been called self-deception, really self-aggression, really, because we may not see how we turn people against us by our interior models of how we see them. How we see people is how we treat them, and how we treat them is who they become. So why does this bring us into the talk about leadership? Well, if leadership is a continuous access, and I'm always depending on, in automatic ways without catching it, my voice of judgment, I'm going to tend to misuse information. I'm going to probably have unchecked beliefs, unchecked information, assume someone else's intent, assume I know what's going on, when really I'm editing it. I'm right in the middle of downloading what I knew from the past, an existing framework that I use to make sense of it. And what I don't see is how that becomes the causal force of the issue, because I can't solve the problem that I'm experiencing at the level of thinking that's causing it. Albert Einstein. So our mental models, our voice of judgment, become the heart of the matter as leaders, because it's how we learn to listen. If I don't see my own seeing, how do I make space in myself for something new? If I don't hold an open mind, how do I see an alternative? How do I see another perspective? How do I see a greater part of the truth that I might miss because I'm ignoring data to the extent that I'm seeing through my lens? And so we must give that opportunity to ourselves to reflect, to be able to stand in reflection and be able to see the way that our mechanisms of our brain place concepts right over our eyes, put the dirt on the window, put the curtains on the window. We have to be able to say, whoa, wait a minute. This is content that's in my brain. This isn't true. And so we move from this sort of first-person me and making sense of things as we project on the wall to this second-person it. It's like this. It's like this. It's like this. And when I coach professional creators, they get stuck in obstacles. Think about it. The last time things didn't work, why did you fail? Why did you fail? Well, you might say, I didn't have enough money. I didn't have enough support. Right? Whatever you come up with, those aren't excuses. I mean, those are existing conditions. But the reason why you failed is it wasn't because you lacked resources. It was because you didn't have a way to think that made you resourceful. Because when we misuse the old models, we start to solve problems from what we think rather than coming at the problem from seeing how it is. See, we're huge problem solvers. We love it. It gives us a little dopamine. Well, I think I can solve this problem. I mean, there's a lot of creative problem solving that has a lot of measure and merit in leadership. So most often, managers are just solving problems. But that's very different than creating outcomes. One of them is very demolition-driven. The other one's architecture. Creating and problem solving are not the same structure. They're not the same motivation. So I can get rid of something I don't want, or I can bring into reality something I really, truly do want. Music isn't made out of problem solving. Music is made out of making the music because we love it, and therefore we make it. If you ask most creators why they create, they just say, because I just do. I don't know why. It matters. So we come back to seeing what's going on and seeing things that we habitually see, catching our voice of judgment. This is called suspension. So if we want access to this higher quality of expression, our first step is to move from making sense of things automatically in our sort of automatic mind stuff to getting outside of that box. It's such a cliche, but seeing from outside the box and seeing the box, that there is one. It's not that we have a model that's the problem, it's that we forget we have one. And that model is organizing a method. And the method may not be in alignment with what matters to us, what we want. So I can say that, this organization is full of servant leadership, and yeah, we're here to serve people. But after looking at the way we compensate people or the way that we structure our management meetings, it's totally in conflict. We don't set things up to be servant leaders. So on the one hand, we make claims outwardly in the theories that we compose. We espouse those theories. And then we have these theories that are more private in use that we do not make clear to the world. And yet these things influence our behavior. And so the quality of awareness in any system is the single biggest leverage point in changing change. So how do we change change? How do we change change with awareness? Well, we see what wants to emerge. And what wants to emerge might be connecting with something that is in us. A good example is a leader that connects with a sense of purpose. How many times have you seen leaders, or you yourself have asked yourself the question, what's the point? What matters? What do I really want to create? That doesn't start with your head, that starts with your heart. What's the love that I want to bring forth towards something that I choose to bring into the world? How do you come to know that? How do you align with that expression? What's the origin of taking that inspiration into your own decision-making? Well, you desire or you don't desire. That's an expression of love. Desire isn't something that I'm self-interested in, like a gratification. Well, I really desire something. I'm suffering without it. Desire is wanting something out of the love we have for it. It's almost so simple it's hard. It's so simple, it's I truly care, therefore I create. So that would distinguish itself by saying, well, I don't care about this, but I do care about that. There's something that you care about that's different than things that you don't. When it comes down to priority management, that's the heart of the matter. It's not about how you become efficient with your time. It's about how you come to know what really does matter, and you're not at issue with the things that don't, because you're not going to do them. So it's a matter of knowing what matters. It's a desire matter. Now, you can desire or not desire something, and there's varying levels. I'm sure there's certain things in your life that you desire more. Your children are probably one of those that you would be truly unhappy. You would truly be in a very different place without them. So your kids matter to you a great deal. Your health probably matters. I can't say what matters most, but that's very personal. However, you can make a fundamental choice. And the fundamental choice goes something like this, is that I choose to be the predominant creative force in my life. So in order to make that choice, what's not that choice? Well, I can react and respond to the circumstances that prevail and precipitate. We all have them, but it's a question of orientation. See, the expression of leadership, the expression of being in the world, of being here now, of being in the current reality that I'm in, directness with my experience. If I want to help that experience provide insight, if I want to live in the world in a way that the world is teaching me something, then current reality becomes a powerful ally. And that means it makes sense to tell myself the truth, to teach myself the truth of what's really going on. That's a fundamental choice. So I can choose to be the predominant creative force in my life, but that comes with another choice, which is, do I choose to really be true to myself about what's really going on? Why would I lie to me? If I lied to me, I wouldn't really make sense of things that are true. I would make sense of things that my mind projects, like a veneer. So I would just see myself, see the content of my head, like shadowboxing, instead of seeing what's really going on. And I suppose if we see what's really going on, then that brings us to a heightened quality of expression, because it might connect with a deeper nature in us that is compassionate, that is empathetic, that is kind, that is in service to something, in our natural human beingness. But I think it also makes room for a part of us that we don't like to look at because of our ego, is we don't like to admit our own fallibility. Yeah, our own incompleteness. Is we have some rules, some strong perfectionism in our own doctrine, in our own dogma about who we should be. And so what we need to do is offset these unwanted beliefs. Like example, I think I'm inadequate, therefore I need to be appearing like I am adequate. I think I'm stupid, therefore I need to construct a self that appears smart. I think I'm ugly. I don't have any charisma, so I need to come across as a charismatic person. Is we set up ideals to offset our unwanted beliefs of ourselves. And then we create these ideals. They're like false standards. But to me, they're like pollutants to our own happiness, because we never win until one day we realize that we can cut the cord on those ideals. And what's left? Our values, our aspirations, what matters to us, what we care about. So that's where our expression is accessed, is by cutting these ideals to say, I don't need these voices of judgment. They're there, they're old friends, but I don't need to be operating from them nor orienting myself. What if I orient myself to what really matters to me? What if what matters to me becomes the centerpiece of what I decide to do or not? I can desire or not desire. I can decide or not decide. But it gives me range, doesn't it? But I'm being true to me. Now, I'm sure you've heard the other doctrine about you need to believe in you. It's all about improving a self. You need to fix what's wrong with you, which are all pointing at the same thing. Who but a person that would need to fix themselves is someone that is broken. So if you see the world as broken, then you'll probably need to see yourself as someone that you're going to fix, because you're preoccupied with brokenness. There's a lot of brokenness. None of us came from a functional family. It's a big statement. But I think at whatever level we took it in, at whatever level we had the experience, pretty much our families are living in us. What house are we really living in? Are we in the new house of our emerging life, or are we in the past house of what we trace back to the triggers of our family life? The psychologists would love to have us think that we are where we are because of our choices, our development. And so we're a product of all the things that injured us in the past and our experiences, positive or negative. And here we are. So in order for me to move, in order for me to have movement, I need to cure something in the past. But if you talk to a creator, they don't take a psychological view to creating. They don't need it. It's not necessary. What they think about themselves, whether they have high opinions of themselves, whether they believe in things going well, whether they positively think, those are all interesting things in human potential. But real creators that are getting skillful at creating creations, they don't depend on that. They don't need to. I'm not putting it down. It's interesting and maybe make it a hobby. But self-improvement is not a prerequisite for creating. There's nothing wrong with you. You are what you are. It's like music. Some of it has funk. Art has funk. You were made with flaws. You were made with what you are. You were made with your genes. You have them. You have ups and downs. You have highs and lows. You're moody. You're a human being. We're a very lazy species. So what? And so it's not about correcting ourselves. We turn our eyes around suddenly and we say, well, I need to work on myself. A great way for me to demonstrate that I care about people is I need to work on myself. What that's saying is, I don't think I'm good enough. Therefore, if I worked on myself, I would qualify for people to love me. But who but a person that would do that would be someone who's unlovable in the first place? I mean, it's begetting the whole thing. It begets the belief. So we need to forget working on our beliefs. Should we know what they are? Sure. Because they obscure what we see. So we can ask ourselves when we see a voice of judgment, there's an interesting model. I see my assumption. Is it true? How do I know it's true? Well, what would happen if it weren't? Well, who would I be if I didn't believe that thought? Sure, we can investigate. We can gently investigate what our thinking is giving rise to. We can see the way things play out. We can see patterns. Those are great insights. Do we interrupt the pattern? You don't need to. What do? You have another structure. You form a different and more adequate structure. That involves seeing how you see and seeing what's really going on in relationship to what matters. And that goes with creating anything. Creating competency, creating the ability to play the piano, creating a singing talent, creating a career, creating a business, just about any subject matter. It has the same structure. If the path of least resistance is going to flow in a direction where it's most likely to go, we have a balancing process. So when we express what's true and what's really going on in reference to what we want to create, naturally that tension in between seeks a resolution. Naturally, like an archer. In the bow, there's tension. There's force. It's not empty. It's potential. It's alive. It wants to resolve. But this presents some interesting challenges for the leader, because the leader doesn't always get the best approval for being truthful. There's risks with telling the truth. The nervous system doesn't like it. It's an acquired taste. And being true to your desires may mean that it's not compatible with other people you live with, or compatible with your organization or the people that drive it. Those are risks. But then it's also great to choose what you want to create, because you know what you want. If I want to be a singer and I'm a soprano and I want to be a baritone, I may not ever be made for being a baritone, but I don't want to deny myself the opportunity to be true. Hey, I want to be a baritone. All right, so I'm intending to be a baritone. That's where I am. That's what matters to me. And so it's something I hold. It's not being in despair or being disappointed or making up something about why I'm not. So why have an intention then? Because it does something to me. My current reality is different than that. Okay, I can hold that. So it is. I'm not waiting until the day the genie shows up and I'm suddenly a baritone. No, I may take some steps even on behalf of that goal, but I don't have any guarantee as to whether I'll create it. The process is its own reward. And so that expression in me to care about that voice capability is the honest expression that I'm accessing at every moment. I'm aware. And as I set that intention, I put it at the center of my awareness and I move. No, JD, but no, you have to be reasonable. No, you need to be attainable. Oh, come on. I've heard that all my life. That's the past talking. Why be attainable? Why be reasonable? I know why, because we don't want to risk discouragement. That's right. It'll give us a chance to get a hall pass. Well, I shouldn't wish for that big thing because I might not get it. It's a sneaky little powerlessness that lives behind the scenes. Ha ha! It's there to saboteur and sabotage. Of course. I think to some degree we have to admit how powerless we really are. The universe is a wild card. We're not that powerful. Setting an intention doesn't imply control. It's not an expectation. We set an intention and then we make a parenthesis. It's called wise innocence. It means that we have to leave room for the drift. There will always be a drift. And that is the ride of life, the flow of life, the flux. We live in a flux. We are constantly in motion. We are constantly being changed. That is the most important constant of all, is everything must change. Nothing is permanent. So do we throw our hands up and say, well, I pretend to understand these forces that are moving me, but maybe I'll wait on these forces to line up? Well, you can certainly orient yourself that way, but you have the predominant creative force choice to make. You can create because you choose to bring a creation into the world. If I want to create music, I don't need to be waiting on the drift. When I make movement to create the music, I will influence the drift at some level. And that's the good thing. But I'm not here to wait for the drift. I think a lot of folks, because of their worldview, they wait on the drift. And the drift isn't really meant to create. The drift is the drift. If you reflect on it and add meaning to it, you'll find something in the drift. And that's our responsibility, is to conserve something. But the drift is the drift. It's doing what it does. It has its own way. It's creating its own unfoldment. So it is. That's the nature of it. So we know the future by walking. We will be doomed to make choices. Yes, we will. Carl Jung. And so we come back to the leadership element. So we've talked about suspension, getting out of the way of our assumptions, and that's a process of consistent reflection, of being able to kind of hold our assumptions at bay and see them and test them and see if we really truly have what we should believe in our beliefs, and see if our beliefs are believable or they're just a belief system. There's not good or bad beliefs per se. It's just a belief. Whether we use them or not is a choice. We don't have to live what we believe. So we can live what's currently living us, what's currently here, now, present, emergent. Which brings me to the other source of expression, which is the heart. So if we're going to talk about the source of expression of the heart, the love that we feel, the love that we internalize, the love that we bring out and generate great creating with, what's the opposite? Well, something that disconnects us from that, I suppose, it would be shame, is that we, in a way, construct a sense of worth that we've married to what we have, what we do, what we own, is we somehow learn a system of measurement, a merit, that tells us that if we're not educated enough, we're not worthy, or if we're not this or that, if we don't show wealth or we don't have the material things, then we're not an okay person. So we marry our worth to keeping up with the Joneses. And then we spend money on things that we don't have, owning things we really don't need, trying to impress people that we really don't like. What a waste of energy. Trying to get approval. Because at some level we assume that we shouldn't belong because we've disqualified ourselves. And so rather than own our mistakes, which is always an ongoing process, I mean, you have to make mistakes to learn. And so learning becomes important feedback. But our identities get such a cog in the wheel that we say, oh, that must mean something about me. You know, I lost my job. I'm going to take it personal. Well, I made this, I made that. Oh, I'm going to take it personal. Or, hey, this means I'm a really great person. Oh, boy, I'm really a hot dog. This is great. So we use this as a way to fill up these unwanted beliefs to offset our shame. And then we get so entranced in that. And then, of course, life being the wild card, things don't play out well. We have a loss or things change. And everything comes to shit because we just don't have the way to understand something. We're so disconnected in cynicism. And we replace that with a false sense of self that we become so fragile in hearing what's really true because we think it's all taken personal. So we can't use our failures as assets. It puts us on a path of no resilience. And if we did confess to ourselves what's really true, we might just get resourceful. But we can't make contact with it because we're blocked by this voice of cynicism. And so we can see it, right? Is we can offload or cut the cord on our obedience to close off our hearts and to begin to relearn what courage is, which is the ability to operate from our trusting heart, from a heart that knows what it cares about and chooses to create out of what it cares about. And that's a choice. And so does it mean we have to get over some of these things, do the repair work, make sure that we purge the pain and all that? I don't think so. I think that's part of what carries us over as a human being, is that we go through experiences. We do load up suffering. We have those moments. But if our orientation is to lessen suffering all the time, then we're going to be in a fear-based motivation trying to avoid all these things around us instead of, some of these things we just can't control. There will be people that have perceptions and behavior that's different. They will be good. They will be bad. They will be high and low. They're full of all those things. And so we take delivery of it all sides of it, the geometry of life. And so we can reaccess our hearts by being able to connect with our own empathy, of an elemental empathy that lives within us to see where other people are. We're born with it. It's something we all have. And you can sense it when you're in a group or a community or in a family. You sense it on holidays, or the way that you're reverent for your children, or you're reverent for your folks, your parents, or you're reverent for someone that's going through a tough time, is that you can access this point in your heart by being there and wanting to, come out of the service that you need to be there for the other. Sometimes it's just simply being present to someone and just simply listening and holding a space, or looking again and respecting their experience and how they process it on their own, but letting every other be a legitimate other. And so there's no one-upsmanship in that. There's no trying to demonstrate that they have something more than us, therefore. Or I'm one down, I need to get one up, and therefore I punish them, or I come back with a vendetta. It takes out the competitiveness and all this individuality where we need to justify ourselves to be somebody. When really underneath it all, we're all just kind of the nobody. We're really just a nothing, a nobody with a really interesting kind of spacesuit on called a personality. That has all these experiences, and through the frequency of these experiences, we start to kind of validate our own story. And instead, we come to a place in our life where we just kind of let the story be the story. And that's wisdom, is we access our own wisdom by not operating from our downloading and what our heart has had pain for and our mind has told us in the past, but rather opening our mind and opening our heart out of the choice to do so, to show up, to see what has heart and meaning, to be touched and moved by something again, to walk beautifully in the course of the life that's here, and to really listen. But there's one more. There's one more point of access to get to this expression, and it's the one that is a little harder to talk about because it comes directly from what you sense is coming towards you, is that you kind of pre-sense something that wants to come into reality through you. More of a knowing, I suppose, but it's a quality that's deeply, deeply seated in you that's beyond your fear of the unknown, your fear of uncertainty. And to the degree that you are able to live in spite of this uncertainty and actually enjoy the gift of mystery, allows you to presence the qualities of your soul that are looking through your personality. Yeah. That see that from the background into the foreground. And as you awaken that part of you, it's just simply, it's not something you do, right? It's a way in which you're being in the world, of just being at the highest quality of awareness that you can, that you are empty and that you are maintaining your inexperience. And so you'll come upon situations where you deeply encounter a knowing, more than your instincts, of really knowing something good that's kind of reaching for you, something that needs to expand. And I think there's sort of a portal in you that is this wisdom element that makes contact with it. We see something and we sense it so deeply. A sentence someone says or a moment that captures us, a vista, that starts to connect with a deeper source of who we are. And that place within us begins to come to the surface when we notice what we notice so much that it is something that just doesn't leave us alone. I often look at the way Stephen King creates his best stories. Shawshank Redemption, for example, or Green Mile. Well, these are very deep stories. Shawshank Redemption, a story about the soul and resurrection and somebody that has gone through a terrible, terrible set of circumstances, but his soul was never taken from him. There was something that remains. And we all love that hope of keeping things going even though there's no guarantee that it'll work. Chiseling away for 20 years in that prison to get out and liberate himself is a symbol of the mythos of the liberated soul. Yeah, not the soulless, not the soul lost, but the soul fullness. And I think at some level we all have this elemental element, and we're thirsty for it. And so therefore we find a place of rest, of reflection in the middle of things where we get real quiet. And so we might come to it in the form of a meditation where we concentrate on just one thing and become mindful. Or we might find it in a moment of lovemaking where we let go and let come something great. Or we jump into an experience and let everything go and allow things to emerge. But I think there's a certain quality of courage, of soul service to a courage and a commitment to this unknown, that we literally take a meaningful leap with this quality of expression to do good things. And to know who we choose to be by virtue of just being a warrior of that human spirit that's there waiting for us, a destiny that we sense is needing us in some way. And I think all leaders, in some sense, they connect with this in some sort of emerging story, that they begin to go outward and they see a design element, and then they begin to incorporate it through a series of kind of fiddling with it, trying it out, putting it on, trying on the idea, moving it back and forth, something so non-adjacent to the story that's been prevailing, that they sense a moment of inflection, a watershed moment to come into something different. And so I think it's like a divine twin. There's something deeper in you that wants to emerge. And so it requires your reflection to ask the deeper questions of what moves you and inspires you, what amazes you, what challenges you on a daily basis. Yeah. And so when things come from there, when ideas come from there, when your attending and listening comes from there, you're accessing a quality of your being that's animating you at a level of source. It's behind the thought level. And that this level of source is something that is always there. It's always been there. But you have an opportunity through your awareness to put your personality kind of in the bleachers for a minute and come back into the very basic, the homecoming of the way that you can see, the way that you can express, the inner place from that which you operate, your source. And so you'll know it when it talks to you, when it whispers to you, yeah. When this place is sort of a mercurial kind of non-languaging felt sense of something that you need to do. It is an urge, a dynamic urge that has movement. And as you load it up, you can then make decisions. Do I want to choose to create this? What do I want to do? But let's remember that what's moving in you needs to move out. I think when we hold on to something and we don't move upon its trance, kind of its signals of what it's kind of picking us up to do, we move into depression. Because we depress, we compress the thing that is scaring us because we're not sure how it's going to play out. It may be so new and unfamiliar that we have to create it separate from what we know. And so it challenges us in a way that we don't quite know how to work with it. And so when we turn towards it, we have to take that ego, that part of us that wants to know everything's going to be okay, and put it in the other seat. Put it in the passenger seat and say, hey, sit over there. I got this. And then our soul takes the wheel, and we say, I choose. And so you don't know how to create it, but you say yes, and you say, I'll figure out the how, because you're operating from your heart, your spiritual heart. And you know that what you're doing is right. Even if it doesn't work out, you know that what you're doing is right, and that's the hope of it. It's not a prognostication. It's not a prediction. It's something that just must be because it must. There is no decision to make. It's a sacred project. It's a seated project that's in you, and it's not about finding it, It will find you because it won't leave you alone. I said Stephen King because the way he would select his books is the way that they would stick around in his interior and inform him, I'm ready to become real. Write me, write me, write me. And as the books would line up, they would stay with him, and then he'd yield to them based on how long they'd hang out inside of his heart. And then he would interiorize it. He would make a choice. He would be informed. He would use his own self-knowledge, be able to wield the creation, bring forth the creative process. This brings me to say that sometimes our ideas about time, our models of time, conflict with our ability to access this point. Because in our Western culture, we have such ideas that time is an enemy. We don't have enough. We feel like we're constantly running out. But what we don't see is that our belief that we don't have any actually makes it so. Because even if we had it, we wouldn't use it. We're so interested in identifying with our ability to get things done that we run ourselves amok with an endless to-do list that begets itself. It creates more to-dos. And so what we end up doing is making our belief true that we don't have any time by filling the time up with the ability to make sure that's true. But we have plenty of time. We have 24 hours a day. We all do. Everybody in every walk of life has 24 hours a day. So the time that we make up in our constructs in our mind, our voice of judgment says time is this. Time is like this construct that we use to control the world. We're trying to have some sense of control of the world. And so it's a construct of the world to avoid being controlled by it, really. Because if I can say 4 o'clock, I can do things to avoid something that'll happen because I don't like the mystery. So I can say, well, it's 4 o'clock. This is where I need to be. It gives us an orientation to be busy, to protect ourselves from the mystery. Because if we were to experience kind of the agriculture of time, the seasonal time, the kairos time as they call it, this is the time of accidents. And we're too scared of accidental time because we'd like to play off this hallucination that we actually live in time. But time is thought. There is no such thing. Time is just a mental model. That's all it is. Time is just a mental model. And actually what time is actually, it's this. Money is time. Money is a resource in our world that supplies us some sort of time. And so we have all these thoughts about money. Well, time is money. Well, it's really not, because you get paid for the value that you create in the marketplace. You get paid by the opportunity. You don't get paid by the amount of time. You get paid by the amount of value that you give someone. So you can leverage your time. So there's quality time and there's quantity time. And when you're in the quality view of time, you begin to treat the time that you use a lot differently. You multiply your time instead of trying to manage it. So you might, instead of doing the thing that you normally would do, is you put yourself into thinking strategic. I might decide not to do something because it doesn't matter. Good play. Get rid of the guilt. Or I might hand it off and delegate to someone else who's more suited for it. Or I might automate something so I can multiply it. But the point is, I'm not stuck in the model in my mind of what time is, but rather I'm making time for more time. So I make more effort now for less effort later by using time as a way of multiplying my time by the money that I'm earning. So money becomes a very powerful function of earning more time. If you want to see how wealthy someone is, just look at how much they have in the bank. They'll tell you how much time they can take off without working. Is they have a more abundant time to be able to get to some of the self-actualizing that they want to do instead of food, clothing, and shelter and some of the lower needs that they have on the hierarchy. And so the idea is that the more wealth that they create, so too do they have more money saved away so that they can access a kind of time that is more experience-based. And they'll tell you, I'm interested in creating experiences, not outcomes, because it's life after money. The money buys the time. The business serves their life. And so in their creative process, they're very oriented around a life plan. They're very oriented around what matters to them. But their business is a function of creating that. And so the quality of expression that they have is they care about all these other qualities in their life, and they find out what's supporting it and find out what doesn't, and then they organize their time around just that, of either creating it by maintaining things or cleaning things up, preparing and getting things ready, planning, or they're actually executing, doing things that matter to them. They're setting up the performance, or they're actually taking total downtime, renewal, and rejuvenation. And so they live in a very different way of using time. Instead of weekdays and weekends, they have downtime, they have preparation time, and they have prime time to execute on things that matter. And so we teach that and we coach that. And so it's a very different model that's based on these other ideas about the quality of their expression. The quality of your expression is your energy. It's not time. It's managing your energy. That's the difference. It's a fundamental difference. And energy has to do with how much of your psyche, your soul, your enthusiasm, in theo, which means God within, is within what you're doing, that you're participating and being involved in life. See, I don't think it's happiness that we're after. It's involvement. And the involvement in our life is wanting to be involved in creating something we care about. I've noticed that people are happier people when they're doing that. They're moving towards something. They have a place to go that their aspirations are true to. They're looking at their current state. They're in a deep learning process. They're enjoying the process itself. They're deeply involved in the process. They're looking at their strengths. They're learning new strengths because they're building skills. And they're building people around them that can help them do it. Better relationships, better self-knowledge, and all the above. This is where people can access their happiest moments. So I've heard some people say, well, you're happy anyway. Well, sure, you can access contentment at any time. Contentment doesn't require the conditions to change. So it's not like you're creating out of a discontentment, because that's not creating. Creating is out of the contentment you already have because of what you appreciate. This is gratitude. Gratitude is simply knowing what you have. It's current reality. And so if you know that everything that you have is the present, that's a gift. And that whatever you're getting, you're learning to receive it because you choose to face and turn toward the current state without deflection, without editorial, without exaggeration, without denial, but learning by looking at things just as they are. And that's a choice, being true to yourself. And so as you open your will, this grand will, not your puny will, not the one in your own little will, but the grander will that fills your will, the will that stands in need of you, the willingness to listen to the generative order, the call of your time, the thing that you are in your own dog whistle answering, you hear in the pattern of life, your place to take in the ecosystem. Let's not get too grandiose about this. We're not talking about bumping into a purpose, finding the Holy Grail, having to search for something, it in shining armor. We're talking about accessing a level of caring for something that is delivered to you, that's pointed out to you through the course of reflection of your experiences. And how you'll develop it is through the silence, the reflection, being in love, loving your strangers, loving your communities, loving your children, having those moments, being in the difficulties, stepping back, not thinking about what an F-up you are, but thinking about the fact that you made mistakes. They don't represent you personally. They're beautiful gifts. You can learn from them. You make life your teacher. You make life your teacher. And so everything is waiting for you. Everything will be okay because everything will be okay. High, medium, low, whatever shape it walks in with, it will be at your door for sure because you are moving and the future is happening every second. It's right here. So if you choose to check out and you don't want to open up to the present, well, then you're not going to meet the future. You'll be living somewhere in the past. But if you meet the future, you realize that you can hold your attention very fiercely in the moment. You can hold an open mind. And you can hold your open heart and understand something at a level like that with respect. And you can hold an open will and let go of fear and challenge yourself into the unfamiliar. Engage in something that you don't know how to do. That's the juice of life, is the uncertainty. If we were certain about everything, it would get boring. We would never have a puzzle that would challenge us. The game of life is being resourceful. The purpose of life is to live it. That's the adventure. And the creative process is one of the best places to fuse your intellectual and your emotional and your ontological or spiritual, your beingness, your connectedness into one creative act. Bringing into being what you care about, observing the current reality and relationship, and constructing a next step or action, knowing what to do moment by moment. Are not those the conditions for the real learning? Those are the conditions for learning. We learn by doing. All doing is knowing, all knowing is doing. We learn by things we do. We don't need to know how to do them. Some we will, but we don't need to convey that we do. We're so busy trying to stay safe that we don't know how to give up our status, our security, and our comfort to make a breakthrough, to create. So it's not about working on ourselves. Let's get that. It is about coming into this quality of expression that you can access at any moment. It's about using the creative process. That's how you get intimate with it. If you want to know who you are, create something you dream about. If you want to know who you are, create something you dream about. Oh, you will learn very quickly your shortcomings. Oh, you will. And you will learn very quickly what your assets are. Oh, you will. Because at some level, while you're creating something that you really, truly care about, you're going to enjoy the process of being involved. That's the process of involvement. But let me tell you that what this expression is not is the emotional tension that starts to come up. That's all part of the process, the setbacks, the frustrations. But we are not that tolerant to these things because we're a consumer society. We haven't really learned in our society how to be tolerant of crisis or unreliable conditions, rough rides, things of that nature, like other countries that have this fundamentally in their basis. You ask anybody in Mexico what they think of a crisis, they say, what crisis? We're in a crisis all the time. Or you ask anybody in another country about the basis of the ground they walk on. Look, it's not steady. It's not composed. It doesn't look aesthetically predictable. It doesn't have the kind of qualities that the West has. And so you learn how to work with the conditions that you're in because you're not organizing out of them. You're organizing out of you, your choices. And that's learning how to create. That's learning the spirit of the creative process of bringing something into being of what you care about. That's learning the orientation of the creative process of creating something because you want to bring it into the world. And that's the mechanics too, because you're learning the process by doing the process. Every decision is a guess. So it's time to create. So it's not about being anything. We're not talking about being in a quality of expression because that would suggest that you're not being anything. You're being you. But you're not preoccupied with you because it's not about you. It's about creating something different, creating something new, creating something you love, creating something you care about. Even your life-building process is the subject matter of the creative process. All that. And so I hope that this, about leadership, that leadership is this quality of expression that you can access at any moment. I've given you some interesting ideas and tools about how to come into alignment with this, how to imbue this in your being. It will come naturally as you open the perception to access kind of a feed of what's coming in intellectually to you by holding an open mind, suspending voice of judgment, holding an open heart, suspending your voice of cynicism and shame, because it's not really something you need or depend on. It's there, but you're just seeing it as a spectator. And letting go of fear of what's around the corner, fear of the unknown, fear of something that you can't know, because you can't. You get so honest with yourself, you see how powerless you actually are, that setting an intention doesn't assume powerful. It's just being the predominant creative force in your life. And that's a question of orientation. You learn by the intention that you set. And it does something to you. It orients you at the current moment. It's a rudder for making the current decisions in the present. But will things play out as you expect? No. So what? Once you get there, you'll have more things to learn. So there'll be a different current reality as you move forward. It's like this, and it's like this, and it's like this. And some of that will be movement from you. You'll change the drift. And some of that will be incoming and it'll be development, something that comes in. And how you take it in is how you show up. And how you organize that to maybe be more of your intention. Great, you can learn by doing. You can learn by what's true. What you come into is a higher quality human being than you've ever been. Because this is a place from which you can organize your life-building process in all aspects. And so I ask you to consider what moved you in this presentation. What was it that really got your attention or got you excited? What did you find? What was the dog whistle in this piece that I said? What was really for you that you needed to hear? Maybe that's part of the grand will that isn't necessarily about me or holding an idea, but rather something bigger that brings us into wholeness altogether. A grid or a field of possibilities that perhaps is consistently bringing us into consciousness as we put ourselves more and more clearly into current reality and see things that are there and things that are moving and things that change us, really, and that we can be changed, and that we can live a life of being lived while we live it. We can pretend to understand the forces that move us at best, but we don't need to answer all the big existential questions or get into who we are and all those things. Just create what you love. Thank you